Hi, this is Shweta. We are a team of 4 members, and this recording is made for CS550 Project Component 4. So basically, we are a team of 4 members, and we have designed a database system for frequent flyer program. The major aim of this project is to develop an Android application that can make requests based on the user requirements through servlets and JSPs, and it is capable of retrieving information from the database. To begin with servlets, let's look into a basic overview. Then we can follow up with the coding part. Servlets are basically responsible for handling HTTP requests and responses. However, servlets can utilize JDBC connection to interact with the database for the retrieval of information. Only with this connection, they are capable of retrieving the information from the database. Without this connection, the servlets cannot interact with the database. So they use the web server, which acts as an intermediary part between the database and the request that is being made. So these are the lines of code. Initially, we perform all the required imports. These HTTP and annotation imports are being performed. Then we have written web annotation. This at web servlet denotes that it is an annotation. This annotation is basically written to ensure the type of URL that we are determining, like the how the URL should appear will be determined with the help of this annotation. So we are using the doGet method. This doGet method will help us to make request, and it is also capable of sending the responses. So this doGet method contains basically two different objects. One is the HTTP servlet request object and the response object. So there is we can send parameters in the form of HTTP encoded strings. Like we can have different parameters in the HTTP string. So these parameters we are going to get those parameters using the get parameter method. So whatever is going to be written to the URL, whatever parameter is going to be written to the URL, that can be retrieved using this method, the get parameter request.get parameter method. And then we can perform a write also. This is going to be a response. So we are capable, as I've already said, that we are capable of sending back a response. So we are going to perform a write on the web page. To do everything, to do all of these, we are going to request for a particular username and password from login table. So for that, we are going to establish a connection with the JDB, with the database. So we are going to use JDBC Oracle driver to establish that connection. And we are going to create statement. This create statement is responsible for having a select query, and this select query is responsible for fetching the required information from the database. On retrieval of the required result set, we are going to say whatever is going to be retrieved from the database, it is going to be stored inside the result set. If the result set contains the username and like if the username and the password exist in the database, then we are going to give the output as follows. It is going to be the passenger name along with a yes string. If it is not going to present, if it is not present in the database, then we are going to print no on the screen. Now let's move on to JSP, Java server-side programming. JSPs are also responsible for making HTTP requests to fetch data from the database, while servlets require explicit implementation of doGet and doPost method to handle different HTTP methods. JSP abstract this process and it automatically generates the necessary servlet code behind the scenes. So we can directly use the request.get parameters and all without having any import of HTTP and other annotations, without importing any Jakarta part. So let's proceed with the code. So basically there are 6 to 7 different JSPs which we are going to code. The code is almost similar in all the JSPs. First we will register the driver. First we are going to register the driver Oracle JDBC driver, and this ensures that the driver is loaded and is available for establishing connection to the database. And this is the connection string. We are going to make a connection. With this connection string, we are going to establish a connection, and we are going to use a create statement. This create statement is responsible for executing a query. So in this info.jsp part, what we are going to do is we are going to have certain requests and responses. So the request is based on the passenger ID, which we are going to pass as a parameter to the URL, and the response output is going to be the passenger name and the points collected by the passenger. So this is going to be the response, and this will be printed on the output screen. So this coding part is similar to almost all the JSPs. The only difference is that the query will be different in all the JSPs based on the requirement, based on the request and the responses that has been specified. We are going to change it. Now moving on to flights.jsp, the input parameter, the request input parameter is going to be the passenger ID. So we are going to use that as the get in the get parameter method, and we are going to pass that passenger ID in the query. So the response output will be flight ID, flight miles, destination for all the flights belonging to the specified passenger ID. So this is going to be a response. So that will be printed on the output screen. Now moving on to flight details. The coding part related to the connection and establishing connection and all is similar, as we have already mentioned. The request is going to be based on the flight ID. So we are using the get parameter method to retrieve the flight ID that has been passed through the HTTP string, and we are going to pass this flight ID to the query, and the response is going to be flight details, that is the departure date time, arrival date time, miles, and the trip details related to the flight. This result will be printed on the output screen. Now moving on to award IDs, it is also containing the similar code. The request is based on the passenger ID. So whatever awards the passenger has got will be printed on the output screen. The awards that are related to the passenger will be printed on the output screen. The query has been designed in a way to handle that. Now moving on to redemption details, again the database connection part and all is going to be similar based on the award ID that has been assigned to a particular passenger. We are going to retrieve the details, award description. We are going to print all the required award details on the screen. Now let's move on to the next JSP, that is the getting passenger ID. This is going to be like we are going to retrieve all the various passenger IDs except the one that has been passed in the string. Except for that, we are going to retrieve all the other passenger IDs.
Hi everyone, this is Pratyusha. So I'm handling the activity.java files for the frequent flyer Android application. And for this frequent flyer Android application, we have 6 different activities. And let us proceed with the first activities, which is main activity.java. This part of code which is used to retrieve the username and password entered by the user in the edit text views and constructs a HTTP get request URL with these parameters. So here the URL is getting constructed, and we are here creating a a request queue object using the Poly library to manage the HTTP requests. And yeah, coming to this one, here we are creating a request object, string request object. This line of code constructs a string request object with the HTTP get method and the specified URL and a listener for handling the response. And in the on response, we handle the request successful response from the server, and in the on error response, we handle the error response that comes from the server. And in the on response, we have this result. And if the result is yes, if the authentication is successful, the login is successful, it moves into the if clause, else it moves into the else clause. So here what is happening, we are creating a new intent which actually passes the pass ID from main activity to main activity 2 using this intent. And here we are splitting the entire response, taking this column as a delimiter and assigning the second part of the auth to PID and sending it to the second activity, main activity 2. Main activity 2.java file. Here, we are creating a string request which sends a GET request to the specific URL, URL1 as specified here. Once a response is received, the onResponse method of the response listener interface is called. This method takes the string s and as input parameter, which is a response from the server. In the onResponse method, we receive the string s and we are trimming it and just to remove the trailing white spaces, and we are storing it in the result. Here we are splitting the result further, taking the hash delimiter and storing it in an array content. On moving further, we are splitting it into another array content 1 using the delimiter comma. And now we are storing these two parts of content 1 array to text view 3, text view 4. This particular part of code is downloading the image from the link specified, which is related to the particular pass ID, and display the image on the UI. And in the same UI, we have four different buttons, one for flight details, all flights, awards, and transfer points. So there is a click listener for each button. When the button is clicked, the code inside the onClick function, onClick method is executed. Here the intent class is used to switch between different activities. Here in case if we want to move to the flight details, it moves from main activity 2 to main activity 3. And here using the put extra parameter method, we are passing this pass ID to the next activities. And the start activity uh, further like triggers the intent too. The same happens with all other three activities. In the main activity 3.java file, we have the flight details of the passenger. In line 31, we are creating a string request object with get method, get request method, and a URL specified. And also it includes the response listener object that defines the action upon receiving the response. Here we are passing that response to the onResponse method, and we are trimming the response and storing it in the string result. Also, we are initiating three empty strings, output 1, 2, and 3, and we are splitting the result using the hash delimiter and storing it in the rows array. From line 39 to 44, we are initializing the for loop using the number of rows length and running the loop. And here we are splitting the rows based on the comma delimiter and storing the values in output 1, 2, and 3, which generates the flight ID, flight miles, and destination for different flights. In the main activity 4.java, we have all the flights taken by a passenger. To be precise, we have a spinner that holds all the flight IDs that a passenger took. Upon selecting one of the flight IDs from the list, we get the departure, arrival, miles, trip ID, and trip mile details of that particular flight. So here we are setting the layout for the activity underscore main4.xml file. We are creating an array list for storing all the flight details. Using the getString extra, we are fetching the pass ID from the previous activities and generating a URL using the pass ID. Using this particular code snippet, we are creating the spinner and text views. From this particular code snippet, we are creating a new string request object that uses the get method to receive the data from this URL, and a new response listener is defined that handles the response string which is further split into rows and columns and added to the list array. In lines 49 and 50, we have an array adapter which is created with the list array and set to the spinner element to display the data. This gets the selected item from the parent adapter. In line 57, this gets a selected item from the parent adapter and converts into a string and assigns to the flight variable. And taking the flight variable, we are generating the URL1 and passing it to the string request object that we created to fetch the data. Here we have this response listener object which handles the action upon receiving the response from the request. We are passing the string s to the onResponse method and we are passing the entire result here to extract the departure time, arrival time, miles for the selected flights. We are also initializing two empty strings trip ID and trip miles. In these lines of code, we are displaying the three text views in the UI to display the flight details, departure, arrival, and miles. And we are also displaying the trip ID and trip miles. And we are passing the response string to extract the trip IDs and miles for the selected details. In the main activity 5.java, we have the redemption history of the passenger. Here, the S is trimmed and like to remove the trailing spaces and stored in the string result. The result is further split using the hash delimiter and stored in the IDs array. Now we are initializing a for loop, taking the ID's length and appending it to the list. In line 50 and 51, an array adapter is created with a list array and set to the spinner element to display the data. This gets the selected item from the parent adapter again and converts it into a string and assigns the particular value to the award variable. Now using this award variable, we are generating the URL1. Creating a new string request again, we are using the getRequest method to retrieve the data from this URL1 and we are also using a new response listener which is defined to handle the response string which is used as input or the parameter for onResponse method here in line 62. This response is further stored in the result variable and it's split using the comma delimiter and stored in the res array. We further are storing this two components of res0 and res1 in ds and points. We are initializing two empty strings of date and execute exchange center. In this particular line of code, we are displaying the text items like price or the award description, points needed, redemption date, and the exchange center. Using the result, we are splitting it using the hash delimiter and storing it in the rows array. Now we are initializing another for loop, taking the length of rows and splitting it further into the columns to get the date and exchange center data from the columns. In the main activity 6.java, we have the transfer points of the passenger. In this particular code, we are creating an event listener for the spinner UI component that is triggered when an item from the list is selected. So the resulting string is assigned to the dpass ID and the dpass ID is again assigned to the dpass. In this particular code snippet, we are creating an event listener for the button UI component that is triggered when the button is clicked. The value entered here in the edit text 1 is retrieved as a string and assigned to the variable name points. And after that, we are constructing this URL2 taking pass ID, dpass, and the points. A new string request is created to send a HTTP GET request to this particular URL too. And we also have a response listener to decide what to do upon receiving a response. We are taking the string s in the onResponse method and trimming it or passing it into the result variable. Upon successful transfer, we get a toast message that transfer points successfully. And in this particular snippet of code, what we are doing, we are generating this URL 1, taking the pass ID to get all the passenger IDs in the spinner. And we are creating a string request here and sending a HTTP GET request to this URL 1. Same, we are creating a request, we are creating a response listener to decide what to do upon receiving a response and passing the response here onto the onResponse method. So we are here trimming this response S and storing it into the result to just make sure we don't have any trailing spaces. And here we are splitting the result using the hash and storing it in the IDs array. Now we are here creating a for loop with the length of IDs and appending it to the list. And here we are using the array adapter to display all the other passenger IDs in the spinner.
Hi everyone, I'm Manaswini. I'm going to show you how to test server-side component using browser session. So to make it easy, I copied all the URLs in Notepad. Let us see each execution of URL in browser session. Now I'm executing the servlet demo. So with the following parameters as username and password, if the user ID and password exist in the login table, then the output is executed. We can see user ID displayed here, and also if we give any incorrect parameters, we get to see as no. Now let's move to the JSPs. So by executing the following URL, we get the name of the passenger and reward points linked to his account. Now moving to the flights URL, we can see the various flight details including flight ID, flight miles, flight destination belonging to the particular passenger as mentioned in the URL. Now executing the flight details URL, we can see that we fetch the information about the flight details including flight number, arrival, departure time, flight miles and trips details belonging to the flight based on the flight ID mentioned in the URL. Now moving on to the awards ID URL, we can see the awards and the award IDs are displaying based on the passenger ID. Now moving to redemption details URL, on executing this URL, the award details redeemed by a particular passenger is displayed. And then let's see get passenger ID URL. On executing this URL, the various passenger IDs in the database are shown except the passenger ID used in the URL. Now moving on to the last part, executing transfer points URL. We get to see the points are transferred from the source account to destination account. If the points are transferred successfully, we can display the points transfers are successful.
Hello everyone, I am Siddhesh Sawan and I am going to show the demonstration of the activities so as to fetch and display the data. So basically we have a total of 6 activities for the project and each activity is related to the other activities. So heading on to the first activity, which is the login activity. So it consists of a it consists of which is consists of a login part and authentication part, where the user needs to log in into his frequent flyer account which he has registered earlier. So I'm hereby demonstrating an example. I have entered a username which is user12, and the password for the user12 is user12 at the rate. And after clicking the login button, the second activity after clicking the login button, the second activity is going to load. The second activity is basically the main activity, and it consists of several components such as the buttons, the text view, and an image view. Basically, it will give you the profile of the picture of the user, the total reward points, and the four different buttons to get the detailed information of the passenger travel. So heading on to the next activity, which is all flights. It will retrieve the information of the all flights to which the passenger has traveled. In this, there are in the this activity there the object consists of the it will display the trip travel by the passenger along with the flight miles and the departure and the arrival time as well. And it will show the trip ID and the trip miles as well. Heading on to the flight details, it will give the information regarding a particular flight which is traveled by the passenger. So here in the above visualization we can see that the user has the flight ID which is starting with AC874, and the total flight miles are 2095, and the destination is Vancouver. Uh, so heading on to the next part, which is the redemption information. uh, it includes the basically it includes the award details like the award description. So here you can visualize that there is one award which is basically to upgrade to the first class, and to redeem this award you need to have 1,10,000 points, into total of 1,10,000 points. And we can see that there is one redemption date given, and the exchange center which is British Airlines exchange centers, where we can redeem the where the passenger can redeem perform the redemption process. And heading on to the next activity, which is the transfer points. The transfer in the, when clicking on the transfer point, we will get the points that we need to transfer to a particular user account. So I am hereby demonstrating that I am going to transfer to 20 points to a user account. And after a user account, we starting with 1210 user account starting with 1210. And when I click on the transfer point, it will display a message that the points are transferred successfully.